Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of September 30th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this week's episode, an exclusive interview with Vince Guzzo, Montreal-based CBC Dragon entrepreneur and philanthropist. In a fun and wide-ranging interview, we talk about the retail and consumer environment in Quebec, his experiences during taping of his second season of Dragon's Den, how the deals he's seeing this year are different, how he determines whether he's in and out, and with who, and the end of Netflix. Next, I swing over to the West Coast to catch up with Greg Wilson, Retail Council of Canada's BC Director of Government Relations. We discuss the key issues for retailers based in or operating in British Columbia. Lastly, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Vince Guzzo.
Vince, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. You'll certainly be well known across the country with your presence on CBC Dragon Den. But for those who may not see the show, maybe outside of Canada, give us a little bit of sense about yourself and your personal and professional journey and your business pursuits as an entrepreneur and philanthropist.
So we started off. The family started off in the bar business, and then we even had some nightclubs. And then eventually, when I joined my dad and my mom in the business, we were starting to be in the movie business. So. I was coming out of a degree in economics out of Western, was in law school in Montreal, so I was handling all the leases, all of the contractual and this and that. And so eventually, one thing led to another, and I took more and more of a role. And then in 1996, 97, that's when I officially started heading all of the operations of the cinema business. And that's when we, made a concerted effort to go up against, Cineplex and Famous Players, who pretty much had split the monopoly of all the major markets amongst themselves.
And now you're up to, from a Cinema Guzzo, you're up to, I think, 19 cinemas with, 140 screens? Have I got that math right?
No, actually, we're actually 10 locations. We got two on the planning board, one in construction, one under construction. We're at 141 screens, 9 IMAXs. So it's all very concentrated in the greater Montreal area. We have explored. I was in Vancouver last weekend. I was in Calgary for a day speaking to for some fundraising for the Conservative Party, and then I went back to Vancouver to see some sites and hang around with my son, who was at a fencing tournament there. And so we're still looking at moving over some of our locations and actually expanding out west. A lot of people found it strange that I was going all the way to the other end of the country instead of just moving over to Ontario, but I think there's a bigger synergy and a more of a connection, believe it or not, between BC, Calgary, and Quebec than there is really between Quebec and Ontario.
Well, and certainly when you're in the Alberta market, the real estate might be a little more reasonable at this point in time. Might be a good time to jump into that market for that reason, eh?
Well, not only that, I think the other thing is because it's a boom market. In other words, it either goes extremely crazy because it's in the top of oil market booms, or it's a bit distressed, right? So you're at both extreme poles of that market. What's interesting, though, is that they're very passionate people. That's what I can say about Albertans. They're the most passionate people I know. So when they fall in love with a concept, they're all in. They're not nickel and diming you over anything. They're just in the concept, and that's what's interesting. If I look at a Bauer Mall, it's an amazing mall. To think of that mall is like, sometimes you sit there and you go like, okay, what the hell, man? This is, why would anybody build this here, right? But when you're there and it's open, you realize there are people that go there. It makes money. Yeah. It's not it's not just one of those, by fluke retail successes. It was actually calculated and planned.
I want to get back to your thoughts about the business environment and the retail space, consumer confidence. But let's talk a little bit about the new season of Dragon's Den. It's your second season, I believe, right? 14 you joined in 13. So any differences? Anything different? The season, is in the can, so to speak, and we're all experiencing it firsthand. But tell me a little bit about your experience in season 14.
Well, season 13, I was one of the new guys with Lane. So, you can tell that there was clear-cut differences between the two new guys. I mean, Lane comes from one space. I come from a totally different space. I'm actually closer to Jim's way of reasoning sometimes. I'm more of a brick-and-mortar kind of guy. He's more of a Michelle kind of reasoning, sort of what I like to say, overvalued IT companies, just pay 5 times more than you should be paying and don't worry about it. Eventually we'll stop burning money and somebody will buy it for whatever it is, type of thing.
Yeah, it always goes up. It always goes up, right?
Yeah, for some reason, right? So that's the, so there's 2 different ways of doing things. And while I have to be honest on season 13, while I believe I was very honest and very transparent, I was not necessarily always as confrontational as is in my nature to be. Season 14, if you saw episode 1, it starts off with a pretty clear-cut confrontation in a sense. Arlene started telling me how I should maybe evaluate a company that we were talking about, and I just, turned around, I guess, and looked at her and I said, "It's my money, right?" And she said, "Yeah, okay, so you don't mind I'll invest my money how I want?" And then at a certain point, I don't know, something else about, being greedy, and I said, "I'm not greedy. I just don't discount my worth because I know what I'm worth." And it was a clear, so in season 14, depending on how, they'll choose to present some of those pitches, you will see an even clearer difference in how we reason. Conflicts will be more evident, conflicts of personality. Which is not to say that there's bitterness. It's just I know today, and you'll notice it on season 14. I do no deals with Arlene. Let's say I did a few on season 13. I do none on season 14. Just because after one season you'll learn who you can work with and who you can't, whose style is compatible to yours or not, right? So I did a few deals with Michelle, a few with Jim, but none with Arlene, for example, and none with Lane either. So, and like I said, it's in no way a judgment on their personality or on my affection towards them on a personal level. It's I'm 50 years old. My business life is 20 hours a day of my life. I'd like to enjoy those 20 hours. I don't want to be in a continuous, argument with party. It's a lot of people don't realize, and I do this analogy sometimes, and I don't know who I offend, if I'm offending my wife or if I offend, married people in general, when I say a partnership in business is like a marriage. If you think it's going to be a nightmare and it's going to end up in a divorce, trust me, there's no bedroom play, so there's nothing fun enough, in the business partner to justify the torture. So, right.
When you think about the pitches that you heard and the ideas, both last year and certainly this year, any trends, anything that's jumped out at you in terms of as you look back and your frame as an entrepreneur, and what jumped out at you in terms of what people are asking for and the ideas that they're coming up with?
So last year I felt, I don't know why, I felt we were really IT and application heavy. I thought every possible application under the sky was being pitched at us. This year I was actually very, very happy to see there was a little more brick and mortar stuff. There's actually an amazing pitch on a whole design platform that designs homes, one-level home based on the trust concept of wood-framed homes. And so if I remember well, I'm going to probably a spoiler here, but I think Michelle and I did that deal, and I think we're looking at it. I think it's a very, when do deal on it, very interesting. So we got a lot more of the concrete stuff. Last year, I felt, we got a lot of these, a checklist application, another another dating app, a friendship app, another, app to do this and app to do that. And in my mind, I was saying, gee, seriously, man, like, I'd really like to get away from my phone once in a while. Like, come on, man, make something else happen. And in
Make
fact,
something physical.
That's right. And in fact, I think that, season 15, 16, 17, 18, you'll probably get a huge return going back towards more of an experiential product or retail experience. In other words,
right.
I always like to say to people, and unfortunately sometimes they edit me out when I say that because I'm not sure it can pass CBC code of conduct, but every once in a while I would tell people, I'd say, the problem with your product is it's very convenient, but it's zero when it comes to sexiness. And if I can't fall in love, if there's no sexiness in your product, I'm not interested. It's just there's no appeal. And that's what I think is happening now, right? I think there's a big trend that's happening in the retail business, and you'll see it also on Dragon's Den, where what you're getting is we had these sort of boring retail locations 20, 30 years ago, we'll call them the Eatons of this world and whatever. And all of a sudden, these retail spaces got really hurt from something that's very convenient, which is called the internet and online shopping. Yeah. But the problem now is that everybody's going back to this idea, we'll call it the Edmonton Mall idea, and saying, but wait up a minute. Mm-hmm. We can actually make retail sexy again. We just got to find the right combination. So do we now still need 40,000 square foot Old Navy stores? Probably not. Maybe 20,000 will be fine. But in the meantime, now you got to make an experience out of it. Now you got to make it fun. Now you got to make it about me leaving the house, and we've gone through that in the movie business. And my reaction on Dragon's Den was, hey, we're getting more stuff now that's about the experience, that's about the story behind it, and not just it's convenient, I deliver it to you.
It's a very familiar narrative. I hear retailers talk about it all the time. We know that the internet is very productive, it's very efficient, but it's not very inspiring as a shopping place. It's that it doesn't drive experience or inspiration or impulse or all those things.
I use the internet heavily for information. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna go somewhere. So I went to Vancouver. So I will use the internet to tell me where I should go shopping. But I won't necessarily shop on the internet because it's like there's no fun, right? I mean, like I said, I'm in my underwears, my pajamas. I'm in front of a blue screen, and it's convenient. But it's no, like I'm not touching it, I'm not feeling it. I'm not. I got no connection to the item. I got no passion to it, right? I got no, and that's very important. I think that is the key of what makes certain brands amazing. Is that you can feel it, right? I mean, if we look at Apple's, made an art out of packaging. Yeah. And making it feel like it's worth a million times more than what you're really paying for. But it's part of the experience once again.
Part of the retail experience. I think you've laid out a really brilliant insights as to how you look at opportunities and then how you drive your own business. So last question for you. How are you feeling about the Quebec market, specifically, I guess, around consumer confidence? Because you're a good barometer of that, discretionary income, people going to the cinemas. And how are you feeling? You just talked about how you're looking at expanding west. How are you feeling about consumer confidence these days and, with a vision a few months out or a year out?
Yeah, I think, the movie business, I'm going to speak about the movie business because it's the one that is my core business. I mean, I have construction, I got medical stuff, I got pizzerias, but the movie theater is the one that really gives me the gauge, right? So a lot of people didn't realize that at the end of April, early May, when the movie called Avengers Endgame came out, that it was funny because somebody said to me, what do you think this movie is going to make? I said, I really don't know. Maybe make $1 billion, $1.5 billion, or whatever. The numbers weren't that amazing in my mind, right? I was pre-hand, right? Pre the movie coming out. And I can tell you today that the movie is very symbolic in what it's called. It's called Avengers Endgame. So it's the end of the game. And I think that movie has symbolized the end of Netflix as we know it today. That movie has sent a message everywhere in Hollywood, everywhere around the world, which is basically, who would have ever paid $1.5 billion in royalties to Walt Disney for this movie? Nobody. The only guys who paid $1.5 billion in royalties to Disney are movie theater operators, because we made $2.4 billion and we paid. So now, all of a sudden, everybody's saying, okay, wait up a minute. Why are we breaking our heads so much to try and give Netflix movies quicker, when in reality, what we really want is to maximize our revenues in the experiential life of a movie, right? Now, where we got VR, we got arcades, we got food, we got reclinings, and we got stadium seating, and we got these 24-inch wide seats and so forth. Why are we giving movies faster to Netflix when at the end of the day, they won't even report the attendance numbers, whatever, but at the end of the day, they're playing us a flat, and that's it. So, fast forward to today, I get a call from somebody who tells me, so you're going to be playing The Irishman? I said, no. I said, but why not? I said, think about it. You really think Warner Brothers sold The Irishman to Netflix because they thought it's going to make $1 billion and it forfeited $500 million? Or do you think instead what happened is they went over budget, they got to $120 million, and they said to themselves, this thing's not going to make more than $200 million, so we won't make more than $100 million, so we're going to be in the hole $20 million. Let's dump this thing on Netflix laps and see you later, guys. We got our money out and we're good. Because a lot of people don't remember that the last really successful picture that Scorsese's done is Cape Fear? Because everybody says, some people, want to be a little more artsy with me. Say, well, Wolf of Wall Street. Okay, that's $120 million. Yeah. It's not nothing to brag home about. I mean, at the same time, but I mean, I liked the movie. My wife didn't like the movie, but I liked the movie. But I have to appreciate that the movie was not mainstream, blockbuster, $400, $500 million box office worldwide. It did 120. 120 out of a 50% film rental, that's $60 million. This movie, The Irishman, is 3.5 hours roughly. Scorsese. He's got a whole bunch of guys that I look up to because I was a kid when these guys were big names. Sure. So between you and I, you tell my 21-year-old who's in the movie business, his father owns movie theaters. You tell him Scorsese's got a movie coming out, he's going to say, who? What are you talking about? Yeah, who's Scorsese? What do I care? And Al Pacino, he only knows because he met him a few times with me. De Niro, only because he met him a few times with me, right? So in his mind, he's saying, it's not the kind of movie I'm going to run out to watch. So I think the movie business, and what Netflix has done to the movie business is it's forced us to up our game. So
that's a fascinating analogy with broader retail trends, right? So, it's kind of the old, don't let a crisis go to waste, right? It's,
that's right.
You've got to really, exactly.
Yeah, because the shows, right? Because ultimately, let's be honest, right? The movies on Netflix are not that good. I mean, Netflix doesn't know how to choose the movies it wants to produce, and the movies it buys or the movies it gets are usually my movies that are going to die at Netflix, I always like to say, right? They're going to finish they're in retirement, right? So the same way some of my youth idols like, Jane Fonda and Martin Sheen go to retire, at Netflix TV, call it, for their episodes, for their series. The same thing with my movies, right? They play at us, and then they go through Apple TV, and then they go through the streaming pay-per-views, and then they end up at Netflix on the streaming platform. So those are my old movies. The truth of the matter is, what's up to the game is the series. So the miniseries that, the Narcos, the Breaking Bad, the Orange is the New Black. That's what's altered people's perception, saying, hey, wait up a minute. TV, because that's what, once again, people need to remember. Netflix is TV, so TV is actually good. It's actually not that bad. It's, so now, why should I, and I always like to use this example when I talk to my guys about marketing and the kind of movies and, what should we be playing, what should people be producing? I say to them, it's minus 40 outside Celsius. I'm at home. You need to convince me why I should go into my cold car outside at minus 40, drive to your theater, $12, go watch the movie, and come back out to a car that's in minus 40 temperature and it's cold again, and drive back home. Right. Why? Why am I doing this? What is so special about the movie? What is so special about the event, right? So what's happened? That you can make a comparison to what's going on in the movie business to what happened to the music business. Teenagers of today are so used to not paying for anything because their parents have paid for everything. So what they're doing is they're stealing the music, right? They're not even really paying for it. Or if they're paying for it, they're not paying $20 because they're not buying the whole album. They're just buying one song.
Yeah.
But they're still willing to pay $100, $200, $300 for a live concert. So going to the movies or going to the retail store has to be that live concert experience. Because if it's just the movie, if it's just the I want to download a song experience, well, it's just going to get knocked off. I mean, you're not really going to get anybody to pay you big dollars for, just, and so I'm very confident because I think that now, the studios have started to make a connection between, hey, wait up a minute. We sold the rights to our movies to a company called Netflix. These guys have actually annihilated our, DVD market. They've actually
the back
eliminated
catalog market. Yeah.
That's right. So they've eliminated all of that. So everybody now is doing their own platform, right? So you can expect Apple to launch November 1st. You can expect Disney to launch, Amazon. No, but just the studios are more important to me because, those are the guys that are content providers 52 weeks a year, right? So they're doing content for all over the place. The Amazons of this world and those guys, they're like, okay, let's get into this business. But the other guys, the Warner Brothers, the Disneys, the Universals, they've been in this business for 100 years. So for them, producing content for all kinds of segments of the population is part of their DNA. And now they're saying, we're going to go back. We're going to give the best of our product to the movie theaters. They're going to go get maximum dollar, right? They're going to go hit that $1 billion, $2 billion box office number. We're going to get our cut of that, and we're happy. That will generate a snowball effect on the marketability of our movies, right? And then we can put them on our own platform where we can either pay-per-view it for the first 6 months after the theatrical, window is over, or we can go straight to the streaming subscription model at, in the case of Apple, $4.99. First year, I think they're including Disney's, platform for free. So so that's why it was funny that when somebody said to me, what do you think Endgame symbolizes? And I think it symbolizes the end game of Netflix, because I really like to know how Netflix is going to survive in a world of $9.99, $10.99, where you're the only game in town and you still can't make a profit. How are you going to survive once everybody else comes into it, but at $5.99 or $4.99, or they're combining together to make sure that you stop, abusing of their content, and so forth. So I think, like I said, I think the movie business is looking up. I think the retail business is looking up. I don't think the value of real estate has gone down in any way, except for if interests are going to go up, then, we're going to get a cap rate change and so forth and so forth. But or else, real estate, commercial real estate is at an all-time high in Quebec, right? And people are paying way more than they should be in some cases, but it is what it is. They're very confident. And I think that's for two reasons. First of all, the economy's been good for the last 4 years.
Sure.
I think we're all expecting a recession. But also what's happening is people are spending too much time at home. I think, when you get yourself in a position where you're now almost on your own work schedule, you don't even have to go into a space to work for a few hours. You're at home. And then your kids come back home, and then you're taking care. I mean, seriously, are you going to wake up, have lunch, have breakfast, lunch, work at home, have dinner at home, and then even watch entertainment at home? Seriously?
At some point, you got to get out of the house.
Well, not only that. I mean, the biggest problem we have sometimes is we have these wonderful experts who come to tell us, why people love being at home. They just seem to forget to tell us that they live in a 10,000, square foot home in Kelowna, BC, on the water, and they don't realize that the average Canadian may not even have air conditioning in every single room in his home. And may not even have a home. It may just be a 1.5 or 2.5. So that person wants to get the hell out of that house or that apartment, right? It's that reality that we don't always factor in. Too many times I've bumped into bankers who tell me, "But I don't understand your business because I do this, and that." I go, "How much you make? Make $120,000 a year. How many people you think make $120,000 a year in Canada? What percentage of the population you think does that?" So your perception means nothing to me right now. And if you're not intelligent enough to analyze it, that there's a market out there. It's like the argument, why was Walmart created? It was created because somebody said, wait a minute, not everybody wants to pay, or not everybody can pay top dollar for everything. There is a discount market, but we don't have to make them feel that they're cheap. We've got to discount it, but still make them feel that that's the fair price to pay for this and not that it's a discounted price. So all of a sudden, Walmart becomes the point of reference as that's the fair price. And it put a lot of people in trouble.
Right. It becomes a value story, right? It doesn't become a low price story. It becomes a value story. I think that's right.
It's not a Dollarama. It's not a general, I forget what the general store.
Dollar General, Dollar General.
That's right. It's not that.
But they all have their place, right? I mean, you're on the price point scale. Your Dollarama does well, a great Montreal-based organization. So you've got retail along a whole spectrum, and where people want to invest. Listen, Vince, you've pulled together a lot of really interesting threads. For me, certainly, and I'm sure for the listeners, between how you view business cycles and how you view the economy and trends, and you really provided so much great insight. So I really wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy day Well, my pleasure, and thanks again for being on the Voice of Retail podcast. I look forward to catching you up later in the season.
Thank you.
Greg, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm very well.
Well, I'm thrilled to be chatting with you all the way out in Vancouver. You and I have worked together, been colleagues, and have stayed connected over the years. But what a great opportunity with Retail West coming up in early October 16th. We're all heading out to Vancouver to touch base with you and get a sense a little bit about yourself, what you do for RCC, and then the top issues that are facing retailers either based in or operating in Vancouver. But why don't we start with a little bit about yourself? Tell us your personal, professional journey and what you do for Retail Council of Canada.
So I'm the Director of Government Relations for BC for the Retail Council of Canada, and I've been in this job for 6 years. Before that, I worked for government mostly, on policy mostly, and so I have a lot of familiarity with a number of government officials and with how government works. My day is basically trying to explain retail issues and retailer perspectives on potential government policies to government and explaining to retailers the impact of actions government will take.
I've often heard it said that roles like yours are really about, in some ways, explaining unintended consequences. Do you experience that as you speak, as you visit Victoria and talk about retail issues?
I think government is all about unintended consequences or government policy. We spend a lot of time being surprised. Truthfully, things happen that we didn't expect, or when we go through various policy proposals and what have you and think about them, we find things we hadn't anticipated. So I have a favorite example, if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
A couple years ago, WorkSafe British Columbia, which does workers' compensation here, created some new proposed policies for storage racking.
Okay.
And we read that with interest, and then we determined after we read it that it would apply to every shelf and every fixture in every retail store, the way it was written. Now, that wasn't their intention, but it would have meant that every store would have had to replace all of their fixtures and back of store shelving. And so that was a rather large unintended consequence that we managed to get WorkSafe BC to change.
So they were thinking, let's think about or talk about shelving mostly from a warehouse perspective, right? They were coming at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and it wasn't lost on them that there are a number of warehouse-style stores, and their intention was to get at that sort of shelving. And they have a very important job protecting worker safety, and retail's very supportive of that. But the unintended consequence would have been that all sorts of stores all around the province would have had to replace all of their shelving, and that would have been extremely expensive.
So in that particular example, you would go and speak to the relevant department, relevant ministry, and just explain, here's, you may not have thought of this, here's our perspective, and there's still opportunity to amend such things often, right? With a good sound argument behind us. We
have a great relationship with the policy people in that case, and we had long conversations with them. We brought in retailer experts to explain the impacts. And as government saw the impact, so the proposal from government became more narrowed to focus in on what they really intended on focusing on. And we came up with something that I think is better for them and better for our members.
I often find that, I've been on both sides, been in retail, been a retailer, and then been with Retail Council of Canada. And I think it's one of the things that retailers, the members, perhaps can do more of is reach out to people like yourself to ask questions about what the intention of things like legislation is versus what is the black letter law, so to speak. Because I think there's always intention versus the articulation of it. And I've often found that it's been very helpful for me in privacy issues, for example, to get a better understanding of what the legislators or the drafters were thinking versus what I can see on the piece of paper.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, since we're kind of jumped into one issue, let's talk about the top issues facing retailers, either based in BC or operating in BC. Many are in both camps. What are the top couple of three issues that take up your time and that the retailers there ask you to help with?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of issues that they bring up with me every time. Is there anything government can do? And we'd, of course, like to see something done, but our impact isn't as big. So two of those things are the cost for their employees of housing and transit. The cost of living is a big thing in British Columbia. And what happens is that it makes it very difficult in some parts of the province to find employees. So we spend an amount of time talking about that. I think this government's had some initiatives along the lines of making things more affordable, but that remains a very big challenge. So that's something where we bring it up, and we hope that government's able to make a difference. There are a couple things where we're more directly involved, where we can make a difference. And so one of those that I think of is currently there's a lot of activity on the plastics file, which is to say plastic packaging, plastic single-use items, bags, straws, utensils. So we've done a lot of work there informing government about the impacts on retail and trying to help inform their it's likely government will have a plastic bag ban, and we'd like to inform the exceptions to make sure that they work well for consumers and for retailers.
I guess the top of one of the things at the top of your agenda there is, and this has come out in other conversations I've had with your counterparts, John and Jim, from the prairies and from the Atlantic provinces, is this kind of harmonization at the provincial level or the regional level of the rules, just to make it easier for the operators to adhere to them versus down to the municipality. Is that an issue that you faced in BC?
It's a big issue. It's a big issue with plastics, for example. We have 10 different municipalities that have plastic bag bans at a local level. 9 of the bylaws are quite different. There's there are 2 local governments in 2 neighboring small communities that have identical bylaws. But if you can imagine, it's very frustrating if you operate stores that are either near the boundary of a municipality or in more than one municipality to have to produce different bags for different cities. That's quite expensive and quite frustrating and can lead to a number of unintended operational issues.
Right. The other thing that, the other file, so to speak, that you and I have communicated on recently this year is capacity in the ports. So much product comes through over from the Asian markets through the Vancouver markets. And I know that's been top of mind to you as well. What's the situation? There is some labor issues that could have closed the ports, and there is a bigger picture issue for you to think about. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the labor issue is pretty much resolved at the moment. There was a longshore workers dispute, but happily that was solved. So that we expect that we have longer term labor peace. That's a good thing. The Port of Vancouver is trying to build a new container terminal. They have a proposal for a new container terminal. It's probably the most environmentally sustainable proposal in the world. But of course, any new large industrial development is always controversial.
Sure.
And so this one is controversial, but it's particularly important to retailers and to consumers because 2/3 of the country's consumer goods come through the West Coast ports, and most of that through the Port of Vancouver. And so container capacity is a critical issue, not only now, but for the coming years. And so this is something that our industry is interested in. Oddly, not something I get a lot of questions from individual members. They're interested, they're concerned, but they're, counting on RCC to take care of it for them.
Right. Do the good work. You do. So we talked about a couple of issues. Anything else that comes to mind that you wanted to share for those retailers thinking about their West Coast?
I think there are always labor issues. You have employment standards and labor code issues. This government has changed the labor code this year and the Employment Standards Act this year. Next year, they'll change the Workers' Compensation Act. Those can have those changes can have cost and operational issues, and we pay very, very close attention to them because labor is a very large component of any retailer's costs.
Sure. Well, listen, it's been great. Anything you see on the far horizon? We've talked about ones in future, I guess labor. I mean, several of these all have long-term, short, medium, and long-term implications. Anything on the horizon that you see coming in 2020 with your lens sitting in Victoria as you do?
I think we'll see more on the environmental management front. We'll see more products obligated under what's called extended producer responsibility, where essentially the consumer or the retailer is paying for the end of the life management of the product so that it doesn't end up in landfill. That'll probably continue to be a big issue in BC alone for the next 5 years, and BC's ahead of other provinces, so it'll be an issue in Ontario and the Atlantic provinces for the next 10.
That's a great point because often BC is a trendsetter in these sort of circumstances. So it's a good one for everyone to watch from coast to coast, where they have operations, retail stores in Vancouver, BC, or not. So, well, listen, it's been great touching base with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person at Retail West conference coming up in Vancouver, October 16th. For the members listening, how can they get a hold of you if they have questions specifically for you or some help that they need or some inquiries that they have? How can they get a hold of you, Greg?
They call us at our Vancouver office. They can find the address at retailcouncil.org on the website.
Yep.
And we are happy to take calls. We love hearing from members. And actually, often, even if the member thinks it's a problem unique to them, there are other people in the business who are having the same issue, and it's useful for us to have the flag that something's an issue. Even if we're not able to deal with it immediately, it's always great to know that, this is a concern, we should keep an eye on this.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with the Voice of Retail. And again, looking forward to seeing you in person in a couple of weeks. And I hope you have a great evening and a great rest of your week.
Great. Thank you.
Well, all right. Thanks to Vince and Greg for being my guests this week. And now let's hit the highlights in retail this week. E-newsletter, biggest retail weekly in Canada. And you can subscribe on retailcouncil.org for free. Bit of a companion piece to the podcast as we kind of curate and look at the top retail stories in Canada and around the world. And let's see, where do we kick it off? Well, of course, this was the week where Forever 21 defied its namesake and declared exiting the Canadian market. Many other markets going to try and survive a little bit with a few smaller stores in the U.S. market. We'll see if that pans out. But, the lessons to be learned, I was chatting with a couple of media outlets, are more around the changing nature of retail, the more competitive the retail has become year after year, and that there's not much margin for error. So I don't think the lesson there is, that .com is to blame. I think retail needs to be exciting, needs to be engaging, needs to be entertaining. The product assortment needs to be compelling. Everything has to move in the right direction. And then if it's not moving in the right direction, hopefully you haven't invested too much in too many stores and you can kind of recover and get back the mojo. But not so much for Forever 21. So we wish them the best in the U.S. as they continue to try and reinvent that business. Speaking of a great reinvention of a business, Save On Foods has done an amazing job. Daryl Jones has really transformed that business in large and small ways into a real powerhouse on the West Coast. And now it's back in the news talking about readjustments and executive insights where they're moving Dan Howe, who's speaking at Retail West, actually becomes the president of More Rewards, focusing on the loyalty program and other moves where they're focusing on their e-commerce offering. So really a great job and interesting, great retailer to watch on the West Coast. Speaking of the West Coast, online Canadian furniture retailer Article continue to see explosive growth. I had to double check the facts here. North of 50,000% growth year ending 2017. By the way, the first article was from Business Vancouver. This one I'm speaking of as from Retail Insider. 24,000% growth in the year 2018. So growth has been brilliant, which is, I guess, a bit of an understatement. So congrats to Article. Another Vancouver-based, BC-based organization doing well. Thinking of Indochino, for example, that we talked to Drew Green a couple of weeks ago. Not on the not-so-good news, shoplifting up dramatically in Winnipeg, according to this article from the Global News, where you've got up 77%. John Graham, our Director of Government Affairs in the Prairie Province, based in Winnipeg, is chatting here and talks about, that at the end of the day, every retailer deals with theft, one degree or another. But on average, over $172 million is stolen from Manitoba retailers. So John does a great job of bringing that number home. Pretty startling, actually. So that's something. Moving on to international news, The Gap. Was The Gap ever cool? It's actually a great article. I'm a big fan of The Gap. When The Gap and its associated businesses, 20 years ago, it was such a great place, a great retailer, and it has been since. These things ebb and flow a little bit. And it's a great, actually, historical article that looks all the way back to when they started in San Francisco selling Levi's. And when I was at Levi's, we often talk about how we made The Gap, because at first they were a Levi's retailer and then decided to go down a different path. I listened in actually today on another story from CNBC, but I listened into the conference call with NRF, Matt Shea, and the team talking about their forecast for holiday in the U.S. They're talking about 3.8 to 4.2%, which is very good. Last year it was turned out to be fairly anemic in and around the twos, which surprised a lot of people, but there's a lot going on then. Government shutdown looming. There's a lot going on now. There's a lot of trade uncertainty. Consumers seem very resilient, though, in the U.S. for sure. He says, a great quote here from Matt Shea, the CEO of NRF. He says, the winners are the ones investing in supply chains, making shopping as convenient as possible. I guess in some ways an obvious statement, but nonetheless very important that there are winners and losers. Retail's going up, but not everyone. We started off the news with Forever 21. Not everyone is winning equally. Zero investment stores. This is from Forbes. How zero inventory stores like Bonobos supercharge customers and make retailers more productive. I think the really, they talk about Casper and Bonobos, which is a Walmart brand, Suit Supply, and of course unstated was Indochino. So check that interview I did with Drew Green, a real success story in that exact model. 50 stores, showrooms as they call them. CNBC reports that Bed Bath & Beyond is boosting the store closing estimates. 60 may close by the end of 2019, so they continue to readjust the fleet and see if they can increase the profitability of the remaining portfolio before before push comes to shove. It becomes too late, so taking all the right steps there. I reported on this last week from Business Insider. Rent the Runway is having difficulty with their new supply chain system. It looks like they'll approximately lose about $2.7 million. Paying customers $200 each for canceled deliveries. So 14% of their recorded active base impacted, 10% of impacted subscribers. They could lose 1,400 people. Anyway, so we wish folks at Rent the Runway all the success. We all know putting in these systems is a challenge for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're .com or legacy. These things are always a challenge, so we wish them all the best. Under news for independent retailers, Vancouver-based Native Shoes launches first Toronto pop-up, so stretching out into Toronto. 82 and still running a convenience store. So this is a fun story because this gentleman, actually, who's running the convenience store, great article from Toronto Life, is actually in my mother's building, of all places. So just up the road. So it's a great story, and do read. He's 82. Continued to run this store and runs it like a tuck shop, basically, out of a condo in Mississauga. Toronto Furrier, who flouted Sunday shopping. So Peter Magder, if those of you who have been around long enough, remember how he would flout Sunday shopping, got fined about $500,000, pretty much put him out of business. He passed away this week at 83. Didn't unfortunately live long enough to see Sunday shopping become the norm versus something that you got fined out of business for in the early to mid 1990s. What else we got? Spotlight on digital retail. Some good articles on the more you know. No more, spend smarter. 4 unicorns of retail that are now worth billions. That from Style Democracy, the prior from a Canadian retailer. And from payments, and this appeared in Wall Street Journal. The flesh on the bones of these rumors around Amazon expanding their U.S. grocery footprint. I put it in here under digital, and now they're talking about stores opening as early as this fall. People kind of reading the tea leaves and watching for leases being signed. So lots of more rumor, conjecture than any truth. So we'll see what actually happens with our friends at Amazon. But for sure, and you can pick that up from the interview I did with Walter Robb on the live stage, he kind of acknowledged from his experience, Walter Robb from Whole Foods, their former co-CEO, that indeed Amazon did want to open up a new concept with Go, so to speak, being the C-store, convenience store at one end of the spectrum-ish, and then Whole Foods at the other. There's a big middle piece missing from a grocery strategy. That's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. Be sure to recommend it to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.